Will Tua Tagovailoa elevate or sink the Miami offense in 2021? That and more this week on the Football Guys Dynasty show. And Jordan, Tua Tagovailoa entering year 2. Year 1 was a lot of twists and turns with his season as well as Miami's. What does he need to do, and what can he unlock potentially for the Miami offense?
He needs to do a lot. And listen, they keep stockpiling future assets, and I don't think they're going to wait around too terribly long. He's really got to prove it this year, and he doesn't really have an excuse. He doesn't have the competition of Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's got Jalen Waddle. He's got Will Fuller as additions. They brought in Hunter Long as well to back up Mike Gesicki, and we'll see how that goes, over the next 12 to 24 months or whatnot in the Gesicki contract. But he's got plenty of weapons. And that's probably something he didn't have last year. He's got him now, and it's take a leap time, or it's, we could be sitting here in 12 months, and it's a whole different conversation that we're having about him.
The new phrase for quarterbacks, incoming and young quarterbacks in general, is microwave, because you're not getting a 3-4 year leash as you used to on your rookie deal as a high first round pick. Josh Rosen is a cautionary tale for how things could go poorly for you if a team has a crack at another good quarterback. The good news for Tua is I think Miami's defense is sneaky good. You have weapons, as you said. Also, Devontae Parker as one of the incumbents coming back. Preston Williams has a role within the offense. We'll see how big, but they have a viable, vibrant collection of weapons, kind of covering all the elements you want. And Myles Gaskin, we've talked about him before being underrated, and they really didn't press the position too much. So I wonder about the game manager mode, though. They have a lot of, like you said, a lot of picks. They're looking at things from the macro perspective. But let's not forget, he was pulled because they thought Ryan Fitzpatrick gave them a better shot. And in the games with Tua, you really felt like they had the restrictor plates on this offense. So that's the element for me, is there's a lot of talent around him, but part of my Will Fuller love for him as a player, I have pause about the situation on this 1 year rental, is because I don't know if Tua is going to unlock a whole lot for somebody to get 125 targets and be a top 12, top 18 fantasy receiver or something.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I think if Tua's right, I think Will Fuller is a really good match. And I think is Tua right's the question, right? The vertical stuff, a lot of the four vert stuff that he runs, that Tua is so proficient at Alabama, that's right down the Will Fuller. I mean, that's right down Will Fuller's alley. So where Tua is, right? If Tua's good, I think they're a good match. If Tua's not good, right, you're going to probably be underwhelmed by Will Fuller again, which is somewhat disappointing. I will say, I think there might be something to the idea. Like, I've tried to take what's the positives to pull from his rookie season? Well, he's got a new offensive coordinator. And I think there's reason to think that, hey, listen, Chan Gailey had a link with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, maybe that wasn't necessarily the right offensive system. Maybe it wasn't a right personal relationship type deal with Tua last year. He said some comments too about not understanding the playbook. I think they got thrown out of proportion a little bit, but I don't think that's entirely surprising given all the things that they faced last year. I think he could probably, probably take a positive view on this one. I just wonder what the ultimate upside is. Right? Like, even if, like, in a Tua's good world, what difference does that make in Dynasty? Is that, like, without a huge rushing game, is that somewhere on the back half of QB1? And with all the risks that he presents right now, like, do you want to stay and hope for that as being the payoff?
Yeah, and the Football Guys right now, the consensus projection has him at QB 17, QB 18 for this season, which I think is fair. That's actually a little optimistic from what I was expecting when I went to check for the show here. And the one good thing I will say, and you mentioned it, I mean, is he going to be a top 10 rusher at the position? That is heavy competition considering the influx of the rookies and the existing players like Josh Allen, etc. It's just going to be tough. But the one good thing about Tua, and he did this in college, he did it in his rookie year, and it's a real good flag to post there for a rookie quarterback, is avoiding interceptions. So that was actually his best trait when you look at that. And Joe Burrow did a pretty nice job as well. And I question the touchdown rate, though. I question the opening the offense up enough to get him, because he pretty much needs to get there as a passer. Can he get to the top 10 or 12, as you were mentioning? So that ceiling question for him, And then let's face it, the level of the quarterback is going to parallel the level of your top 1, 2, 3 targets in the passing game. So I wonder if this is going to be an offense where, Will Fuller, maybe another wide receiver, are in that wide receiver 28 to 45 zone, maybe. Mike Gesicki is in that tight end 9 to 15 zone. And that's where we stand. Just generally a good team. Could they make the playoffs? Defensive centric. They're in all these games. But I just wonder, fantasy wise, if we can't point to one singular guy, maybe Myles Gaskin is the guy that finishes highest among his position just because of the stature he has on his depth chart. But I think that's where we sit, as a better NFL team, maybe than a fantasy team for 2021. And that's where we kind of stand as a State of the Union here with Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah. And I sort of look and think, what is to stop? We're gonna be facing a situation next year where there might be Aaron Rodgers on the market. There might be, there might be Deshaun Watson on the market, and they've got future picks, right? And what is to stop them from
a team that's ready to go? A team ready to go and saying quarterback is the thing that will unlock us. In stop. Right. That is it. And Tua, we don't know if it's going to get there. And that could be a death knell for him in a short-term window. Not that he doesn't get future starting opportunities, but a team ready to go held back by quarterback. We've heard that story before in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. And if he's held back, if he holds them back, I mean, they've got future assets to put a deal together for Watson. Right? And that would sort of line up kind of timeline-wise with it. To me, that's even more of a danger, I think, than if he's not really good. I have concerns that they could potentially move on. And I think we've talked about this before. There's a lot of reasons to think that they weren't quite as enamored with him as everyone in the media thought.
Right, because again, remember, tank for Tua. He was supposed to be the 101. And the fact that they were at 5 and still got him. But yeah, I love your angle. And the other thing, we're sort of in unprecedented times of Kirk Cousins, for example, got all the way to free agency, but good quarterbacks are just generally not available. And the threshold for NFL teams to say, no, we're good, we're actually not interested, like in Tom Brady, for example, last offseason, or, Aaron Rodgers, potentially, Deshaun Watson, these level of available quarterback, that's not the NFL. They don't get out of the building. This is not what happens. We're used to guys like Andy Dalton not being let out of the building, or Joe Flacco not being let out of the building because, it's sort of a trap, right? They're good enough. You can't let them go, but you don't think they can ultimately take you where you want to go. Yeah. And I think that's key with Tua. He could absolutely be in that purgatory middle ground of, well, we're not used to having these available options. So sorry. Not sorry. And I want to remind everybody, sign up for the Football Guys daily email from Joe Bryant. Really easy link there, footballguys.com/email. And some of the nuggets this week included CJ Uzomah, could be a sneaky streamer there with the Cincinnati Bengals, potential spot starter. And Cole Beasley, close to home for you, Jordan, roster bubble potential. I mean, they have added at the wide receiver position. I'm one that Cole Beasley is a third down game wrecker. I remember him from Dallas. He went over, had the same role with Buffalo. That's a guy I personally, roster bubble, he's got to be inside. He's got to firmly be inside that cocoon, that bubble, because I think he's a huge elevator for a passing game, NFL wise, maybe not so much fantasy wise. And our next point is from your article, and do want to shout that out. 16 Dynasty storylines for the AFC. So you recently put that out at Football Guys. And another one that we want to point out for this week's show is Carson Wentz. I mean, talk about a storyline of a quarterback falling out of favor, changing teams, and Phillip Rivers had this team on the brink. They almost took out the Bills. It really felt like the Colts kind of misplayed that game a little bit. It was theirs for the taking in the playoffs. They were razor close, and you're talking about a team that probably better this year. They've got some returning pieces coming back from injury. And Carson Wentz, are we going to get MVP level Carson Wentz, or are we going to get retread Carson Wentz fighting to stay above water and keep an NFL starting job?
Well, I just got to say, anytime now we talk about Carson Wentz, at least I won't have to be stepping into the hornet's nest that is Philadelphia Eagles Twitter. So that's always nice. As we'll have
Danger.
be able to put that behind us, which is very nice. Listen, I think I think it's probably I think you put it right. Like, this team could contend. Can it be him? And I have questions. He's underperformed expectations. He's underperformed basically, expectation in terms of his passing stuff. It's gotten worse in terms of his completion percentage compared to expectation the past 2 years. The yards per attempt have never been great. He had the high variance season, and that a lot of that stuff was regression type stuff when he had his huge year before getting hurt. Throws a ton of balls into contested windows. There's a lot of concerns that I have. I will say, if we're going to paint a positive, he's going back with Frank Reich. Again, I think a lot of that's probably the concern that I have with that is I think it's overstated, because I think a lot of what happened there was just positive. It was lucky, a lot of third down conversions, a lot of really good performance under pressure, which tends not to repeat itself. And so that's something that I have a lot of concern with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I will say, in terms of some positives for the situation, is, let's face it, Phillip Rivers was on his last breaths, of viability, sort of in a Drew Brees standpoint of managing an offense, but creating on his own with plus plays was not like his calling card. This was a team built on a good defense, a defense that I think actually, in terms of getting to the passer, etc., can be better this year. And it was a team built on the run game, built on a great offensive line. Those are boosters to a quarterback. So Wentz is going into an environment that can foster competency out of even someone that might be fringe competency on their own merits. So I think that he is operating from you've really got to mess up to have this work against you, in my opinion. So I think they're going to try to make some defined throws, make things easy. Paris Campbell is a significant loss last year. He led the team in targets in week 1, and then he was out for 15 games. I think that's part of why Michael Pittman is a thing right now in Dynasty, like a breakout candidate, because Campbell is coming back, and I think he's going to open some things up with his speed that T.Y. Hilton, Pittman, tight end position, they just don't have it. I think it's going to center around the run game. We saw that Naheem Hines is going to help him out. But I just wonder if the one glorious season he had in the top 6 in adjusted points per game, but that's 3 seasons ago. There's a reason he was available, and people were surprised he got a first in the marketplace. So this is a really critical year, kind of like Jameis Winston, some of these other guys that Ryan Tannehill style, they can turn around their career right now. You have a good year right now, new deal for you. All of a sudden, you're viewed as a franchise guy again. That is within the scope of options for Carson Wentz. The problem, as you said, is there's been a lot of funky stuff going on. I will say this is probably his most conducive and best environment, if he does succeed, to actually do that.
Yeah, and I mean, he holds on to the ball too long. It's just not, and people say, hey, he was under pressure all the time. Like, that was self-induced, right?
Yeah, you make your own pressure. It's correct. Like the guys that Deshaun Watson does that too. He runs around, he takes sacks. He could cut his sacks in half if he learned to throw the ball away and move on to the next down. It drives you nuts sometimes, amidst some of the great plays that guys like that do make from time to time.
Totally. And it was 2.91 time to throw last year, right? That's an eternity.
Don't they normally teach if you can get to the passer in like 2.5 seconds as a defensive line, you've done a good job?
Yeah, that was.
Well, if a guy's sitting back there holding it 2.9, you're like, all right, we're in this. Yeah. Every play, we're in this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just it's an eternity. And you look
he's
at
not
the guys,
a super mobile guy either. He gets out of the he's a rumbler in terms of like he's a big lumbering option. That you think is more mobile, but every once in a while he spins out of it. It's kind of like Jameis Winston. It's not very pretty when he actually does it.
Yeah. And so when, I think you pointed out like he had the one really, really good high-end season. That was when he got hurt. 7.5 touchdown rate. Like, that's multiple standard deviations over
the magical year, the categorical magical. Yeah.
Right. And you sort of look at that and you're like, oh, like, okay, like that's kind of it. And, you could sort of dive in a little bit more too. There was a lot of third down stuff and all that stuff. I have a lot of concerns. And honestly, I think there's a trickle down. Like he has been terrible at throwing short passes. The crosser stuff, like he's not good at throwing to running backs. Like this could be
I was gonna say
this could be a calamity for Jonathan.
What
Taylor.
you just outlined, it's like you're kind of cutting off at the knees. Nyheim Hines, Pittman ran some crossers, as well as Campbell was gonna do that a ton in that offense. Like it's gonna be interesting to see which side gives in terms of that's kind of what they're set up to do. I feel so.
Right. And if Jonathan Taylor's not going to be throwing the ball, like, man, and I'll say, like, the whole Phillip Rivers thing, like being on his last legs, like Phillip Rivers last season in Indianapolis, his only season in Indianapolis, 7.7 yards per attempt in his career. Carson Wentz has never had a season better than that in 5 years in the NFL. So, just from a threshold perspective, they're taking a step back. And I know that people, think that Rivers is an easy punchline at this point in his career, but he's actually incredibly efficient last year. It's just to expect that from Wentz. I think you're asking for a career year.
Final question here is: if Carson Wentz is a success, whatever that means to you, who do you think is the biggest benefactor surrounding on this offense? From where they stand today versus where they could be with Carson Wentz playing well?
I don't know if it's a specific receiver, probably Jonathan Taylor, because I do have concerns about Taylor, right? And I think if Carson Wentz comes in and does his fumble himself and sort of vomit on himself routine that he did last year, that's going to tank the whole situation. And I have a lot of
Jonathan Taylor. I kind of have one similar question with Jonathan Taylor as I do with a lot of the elevation of what they did last year with Antonio Gibson, because they've got Nyheim Hines and J.D. McKissick, both guys that saw a truckload of targets, as sort of the pass-centric guy. So if you're going to be limited to 40, 45, 50 targets, there is a cap ceiling there that it needs to shift a little bit of saying, you're the workhorse, you're the feature back, and sorry, the other guy's ancillary. So I think with McKissick and with Hines, you're going to need to see that shift a little bit from those ancillary guys of saying, yes, that's what you do, but we've got this featured option and we've got to make it more balanced. Can you make it like 70 and 60 instead of 140 would be the split that you're kind of looking for out of this year with Gibson and with Taylor.
Yeah. So I'm concerned. Color me concerned.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 62, Footballguys, a Dynasty show. And do want to remind you that the Footballguys mobile app is back for 2021. Clean design. We've done a lot of work on the back end with the tech crew at Footballguys. Looks outstanding. You're going to get those same custom projections to dominate your waiver wire trading with all your synced rosters, all beautifully shown on your mobile device. That's available in your Apple and Google Play stores. Got a couple trades for us this week, Jordan, and is this going to be getting cute? My leading attention-grabbing question here, because in 12-team Superflex, we had 102 traded for Justin Jefferson. So is this looking a gift horse in the mouth? You sat there late first last year. You got Justin Jefferson. You're on top of the world from a returned value perspective from that pick. And now you're like, well, I'm not happy with that. Let me shift it to 102, which could be a quarterback, could be Najee Harris. It's not going to be probably in that format Trevor Lawrence here. How do you feel about restructuring your roster from Justin Jefferson like that?
I'd be fascinated to see what happened with the pick. I mean, if you're going to go Jamar Chase, you might as well that's a terrible mistake.
Play redraft.
Right, that's a terrible mistake. That's absolutely not the way to play it. That would never be what I would do in that.
Is it palatable if it's Najee Harris? From a round one running back, the upside is there to be an elitely valued more so than you are today dynasty asset.
It's palatable. I wouldn't do it, but I think it's palatable, right? I mean, you're like, again, the first round running back's a big deal. He's an older one. There's concerns there with him and all that. Like their offensive line could be really bad. Like their offense could be not good. There's a lot of questions there with all that. I mean, Justin Jefferson, they kind of answered like we kind of know at this point.
His expected outcome over the next 4 to 5 is pretty darn high to say. Right. To say, yeah, that's not good enough. I need to aim higher.
Right.
And quarterback is quarterback is like
constantly
Jamar
rebuilding
Chase,
situation.
right? Quarterback is like Jamar Chase here.
Correct.
You cannot pivot like that from
Correct.
Jefferson to Fields or Lance or whatever you think the right call there is.
Right. You can't do that. I mean, take a future pick and trade it for Watson. Like if you need a quarterback, like do something else. Don't don't do that. That's a calamity.
Yeah, and wouldn't this be a conversation ender if you sit here and you say, you're trying to trade for 102, and I get that, and maybe you had no other picks in this range, but if you're trading up from 6 or 8 or 10, if you trade up from there, it doesn't cost Jefferson. Like there's other ways to do it. And then if you get all the way to the end and they're like, what will it take to get 102? And the answer is Justin Jefferson straight up. This is a good reminder. It's okay to walk away from deals. You don't have to feel like, I know some people feel like you wasted your time, but you went down an avenue. You attempted to have a dialogue through offers, through conversation, whatever it was, with a league mate, and it didn't work out and finalize a deal. It doesn't mean when they get on the clock at 102, if that's not what this was, or you can't get the player that was drafted at 102 some point in the future, it's not over. Dynasty trading is every day or 10 or 11 months out of the year. So it's not over. It just means you didn't want to pay Justin Jefferson straight up, and maybe you can work something else. All right, another deal here, and this was highly contested on the Shark Pool. Do I remind you? There's a completed Dynasty trades thread with a ton of Dynasty talk. That's where I pull these trades from. That FFPC, this one had both sides. I have a sense of what your side's going to be, but I will just say the market was against you if my prediction is correct. FFPC, we've got Tyler Lockett and a 22 first that was that team's for Michael Carter, and a 22 first that was their team.
I mean, you take. I would treat the picks as random and take Lockett over Carter.
Okay. Most people were on the Carter side. Most people said this statement, and I imagine you disagree. Yeah, and I have a couple things. We go to the final thoughts and quotes from the Shark Pool. Was one of them was the Lockett GM in my league has been trying to sell him for a year with no takers. I find that hard to believe with the season he had last year, how you couldn't sell him in season. But anyway, just to add some context, that people thought Lockett is a borderline roster clogger.
It's absolutely amazing considering that where he finished last year. I mean, what do you I don't know. Sometimes what do you think? What do you
bar.
want?
People have a high bar. Exactly.
Right. Like
I want more targets, Jordan.
Right.
I want DK Metcalf not to be there. I want them to let Russ cook. I don't know. I'm just saying narratives. I want higher than, what was he, wide receiver, like 9 to 15, somewhere in that range. I want better. I want more.
He's like a discount Devontae Adams. Like if you just sort of just looking at profiles, like age wise, like
he was a deep threat. He turned into a possession guy because that's what Seattle needed last year.
Right.
Mind-blowingly flexible as a wide receiver and what he provided.
Right. And they extended him too. I mean, that's the sneaky thing is like they extended him, and
he's not going away. Yeah.
Right. And assuming Russ is still there, like that might be the best 1-2.
Let's start throwing away productive 29-year-olds that are like Keenan Allen with quality quarterback connections. Let's start throwing those away. Let's start lighting $100 bills on fire. Here's another one. There was a comment on the same trade. So with more competition for targets, and I guess they're referencing Dearness Eskridge, I think, in Seattle. Big impact on Tyler Lockett, by the way. And potentially less passing. Let Russ sit there and watch water not boil. Plus age and a track record for weekly inconsistency. Jordan, did you write this one trolling yourself? I'm avoiding Lockett this year. Would much rather have Carter. That was all in the Shark Pool in the completed Dynasty trades referencing this deal.
I don't know what you want. Like,
he's inconsistent weekly. Nice, I want 22 points every single week, and I want him to average 22 points per game.
Right.
That makes things easy for me. I think it was because didn't he have like a 50 point game last year? And that was like, well, if you take that out, he was only wide receiver 26.
Right.
So you got to be really careful. Oh, and this was another comment for that same trade. Michael Carter has a path to being a top 40 Dynasty asset. A path.
I mean,
if he dominates, if he's a workhorse, a rookie workhorse, James Robinson was near there, right? And he was
I mean,
undrafted. Look at all the pedigree he has. Look at all the pedigree Carter has.
I guess I have a path to being the owner of a professional franchise too, but I think the likelihood is pretty remote.
Joe, I have a path to living on the moon. It's upward. It's upward. We all know where it is. It's out there. Got it. Tickets are for sale. I just got to bring a luggage. Achievement granted. All right.
Your beard will keep you warm up there at night.
Exactly. Just wear a knit hat. I'm covered on all fronts. Okay. So, but what do you think about you treat the picks as random? Like, have you been one that, have you ever done the, like I'm trading my first and maybe even something else, or my first and something for, a first, that because you're playing the game of, I'm a good team, I think they're not as good of a team? Or do you really do the random thing of like, I try to get them, but I don't do this swap thing?
So I actually had this come up, and someone offered me, I think it was Tevin Coleman, their first and their second for my first. And like, my rule is I treat them as random. And I said, like, if that's the rule, like, I got to do the deal, right? Because you're getting the first, you get the second. And then the way I looked at it is, I'm friends with the person, and I said, well, I can stick it to them because I can take their pick and turn around
Extra
and trade
motivation
and tank my pick. You know what I mean? And make my pick really late because I can add, and make sure that I'm a playoff team or whatnot. I got extra assets to do that with. And now no longer is my current pick correlated to my team. So, so I have those assets to fire in season if I need to. I never do that. I don't think that we're good at predicting this stuff. And there's just so much that can happen that goes wrong. And unless it's an extreme scenario, and I don't even like to speculate about that because then people think I actually do it that often. But I think a general rule, just treat them as random and see where they fall. And I think you're much closer to where it'll be than if you tried to guess.
Yeah. And one thing I say is it's an interesting dynamic when you don't have your pick. I find teams go all in because they're trying to protect that pick that they already gave away, of trying to finish as well as you can. And you always have solace, and solace is, I think I only use that word when I'm talking about this topic, which is your team is you're trying to contend. Things don't go your way. Last year you had McCaffrey and Barkley. Well, things changed in September for you. So you're sitting there and things go sideways. You have the solace of your own pick in your back pocket of, well, the season didn't go right. My reward or my benefit in the off season is a high first round pick that I have, or a high pick in every round because I didn't trade it yet. That I held off until I know I'm contending. I know I'm in the race, and maybe I am looking for something. So I'm open to trading it now because we have a better sense of where it is. But if you've traded that away and you stink and things go sideways, that is the rolling snake eyes, because now you get to the offseason, you're like, well, what do I have? I got nothing. If you had someone else's pick, you're like, well, that turned late. Mine's early. I got the wrong pick here, like you said. So, yeah, I usually like keeping mine. There are dominant teams that are I have been known to trade them or do this swap game, but those are extreme settings. We're talking like probably a 3 to 5% of dynasty team scenario of you're really strong. You can get 2-3 injuries. You're still fine. And you're good to go. And you kind of trust yourself. The range of outcomes in this league, in this setting with this roster. So there are exceptions to any rule, but in general, again, you like to have that backboard of insulation of things go poorly. Boom. I get one of the top assets of the offseason.
Right. I think along the lines you said, like in that situation where you're trying to hunt that future first, like throw a bunch of stuff on top of your second to get the first, more so than
get what you want and add to your side. Right. Is the thing. Like the counter offer, people have oh, well, now we have to reconstruct the whole deal. Now, I like to just kind of keep adding, and trying to get it that way. Oh, you don't just want a second? How about a second, a third, and this player? Oh, you don't like that player? How about a second, third, and this player? You just keep going, and it's a Rubik's Cube. You just keep trying to turn those dials so the colors line up. All right.
Let's hope it's not a Rubik's Cube. I'll never get the deal done. Just keep
exactly. Have you ever solved one? I've never solved one. I know when I was a kid, one time I like solved it by quote unquote taking the stickers off.
Right.
I don't know why I did the quotes, but yeah, like there's people that have you seen these people that it's like, oh yeah, I'm handcuffed and I'm blindfolded and I'm underwater and someone's hitting me with paintballs and I solved it in 4 seconds.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know if I can talk to those people, to be fair. Like, how your brain works.
Yeah.
You must think we are all like gerbils. like the level they're operating on to be able to do that. What's one thing like that? Or like, what's a little skill thing that like impresses you when other people, it might not impress them? Is there some like thing you've seen, some skill where you're like, I could never do that and it impresses me?
I mean, the Rubik's Cube thing, I look at that and I'm like, I don't know. Like,
for me, it's juggling. Like I see, like, when you go to those, like, yeah, you get the people that are on the the stacked chairs, 100 feet in the air, and all these other things. But to me, it's the juggling of the various objects. Because I've tried to juggle, and I can do it, 5-10 throws in a row. But I can't sit there, have a conversation, bounce balls off walls, throw them under my legs. Like all this stuff that they can do is just, I'm sitting there like a 5-year-old at a circus. I'm like, I love you. Okay, let's get to some of the quotes this week. Here's the thing. You can't use 2020 hindsight to judge a deal. How do you judge a trade, and how long do you go before you say, I'm done grading it or assessing it, as a sidebar?
So I think the way to actually protect against, and they call this resulting, right, is to protect against, hey, let's just look at what happened and then, oh, it was a good or bad deal. That's if you knew the information, you would have probably made the right deal, right? So,
and the other team wouldn't have.
So, right. So you're doing your best guess. I think what I do is I write down, and I know we've talked trade journals before. I keep one, and I just say what I was thinking when I did it. Right. And I tend to remember these things. Right. What was I thinking? Bet against Jonathan Taylor, or was hunting for a future first, or whatever. Right. Whatever the deal is, whatever reason I was doing it, I put it down, and then I can come back and look at it in 6 months, a year, right, 2 years, and say, all right, well, what, and then I even break them down more. It's like, hey, in these types of deals, I do really well, right? When I am dealing in rookie drafts, I'm pretty good. Well, how do I sort of set myself up for that? If I'm just trading picks for players, I tend to struggle. Well, I can avoid doing that, right? And you can sort of come back and look at it, and then you can look at the reasons why, and I think a lot of the reasons why, like I've noticed, for example, just by writing those down, that I tend to, I tend to buy players as they're dipping in value, and I don't catch them at the bottom of the dip, right? And so that's one of the things that I sort of have to be aware of. That's a bias that I have in my trades, just from writing it down and sort of doing that. Again, the trade might not work out, but that's not necessarily telling you whether or not your process was good, right? Process over results. And so evaluate the process, not necessarily the outcome.
Yeah, and what we're doing is increasing probabilities of winning trades. Looking at how do you win big, how have you lost big in deals, and what are the themes there. But I think working at that, and it's different for everybody. See, that's the thing of saying, like, well, you shouldn't trade picks for players or players for picks, or you shouldn't trade up in rookie drafts, or any of these dialogues aren't going to be accurate going person to person, because it's all dependent on how you're operating within your value structure. This is a big one here that kind of, like, it's a complex sentence, but when you get to the end, it all comes clear. Why would a team weak at quarterback pay that draft equity for a wide receiver in a quarterback heavy draft if they needed quarterback? So you're sitting there. Why wouldn't you just, in a good quarterback draft, just draft your need right there in quarterback land?
Because the easiest way to fill a need is to not draft the position that you have the need at.
Bingo.
Right? That's the easiest way to address a need. And what do I mean by that? Super simple. Right? If you have a need at running back and your option is Michael Carter, right? If instead of taking Michael Carter, you take a receiver, you take a tight end, you take a quarterback, you then build actual depth. Instead of trying to take one shot at Michael Carter, you build some depth, and then it allows you to go out and make trades, right? So if you take I don't know, just pick Elijah Moore as an example, or Rashad Bateman. If they then slide in as like your wide receiver 7 or 8, all of a sudden you have a whole range of options that are that might be more expensive than them, be less expensive than them, that you could potentially put together for an entire array of trades across your entire league. So that's I'll never the easiest way to continue drafting high in a rookie draft is to draft for need. That's the easiest way to do it. You just keep it you're setting yourself up for a repetitive cycle.
Well, and I'm thinking back, we have been talking in one of the leagues we have together, and it's 2 quarterback of we've had basically 2 starting quarterbacks and no more in my memory, for a couple of seasons now. But we haven't pressed the position, and we were in a position where we could have technically drafted a quarterback this year in the draft, but we traded that for Deshaun Watson. And our calculus, and we weren't specific, but we also traded for Ryan Fitzpatrick, I believe, and we've made some other ancillary moves. But I always think it's interesting that people, if you're trying to draft the need, if you actually want to address the need, you're better off trading that pick for a veteran, because you're more likely to actually fix the need. Even if that's a player that, as long as they have a track record, you kind of have an expectation for this season and a role, that they can hang in the NFL. Like, there's a number of roadblocks that have already been achieved when you trade that pick for an actual player with a profile and a resume so far. But I don't see a lot of teams doing that. They don't sit and go, I quote unquote need wide receiver. I'm sitting at 109. Why don't you try trading that pick for Keenan Allen? Like, that actually addresses your position. You trying to squeeze a top 24 rookie season out of Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith or insert wide receiver in that zone, much more difficult. So I find it interesting that you don't see more of that from the thinkers of, I need to fill these needs. Because at quarterback and Superflex, you absolutely can flip top first round picks for quality quarterback profiles that actually help you, right now. And the floor outcome over the next 2 to 3 seasons is a heck of a lot higher than potential, just the ravenous adventure that is first, second, third year quarterbacks of how this story ends. All right. If you get 3 years of elite production out of Christian McCaffrey, this was a great trade. So we talked before about assessing trades. But just maybe a thought on Christian McCaffrey. Are you thinking, does he come back and he's like starting 2 players? Do you have any concern about him venturing, now he's mid-20s or so, of being a complete and utter 2-way stud?
I mean, if you get 3 years of elite production out of anyone, right? That's worth. If you told me that I'm going to get 3 years
Mahomes,
right? Like,
that's what you're buying, right? Like, it's a 90-something% chance, we feel like, with someone like Mahomes. That's why you said, hey, it's 101 next year. Just lock it in.
Right. It's just, some decisions are hard. I mean, I think the thing I would say about McCaffrey is that he has the same risks that any other running back has, and I think he's probably got as high of upside, if not the highest upside of any running back, and right there probably with Barkley, maybe a couple other guys can approach that. But other than that, right? I mean, I think by and large, the risks that are present with him are present with every other running back. And I don't think he's any more susceptible to it, right? That's kind of the price you pay for rostering a really expensive running back. Like, you have to kind of deal with that risk, but the reward's pretty massive. And we've seen that with a lot of guys, right? I mean, how much profit has Kamara made us just by what he's done in his career, right? I mean, just the staying healthy and being dominant, that's highly lucrative. So
dominance is hard to find.
Yeah,
they are relative fantasy unicorns and trying to predict that. And some guys have blip seasons, but the guys that actually do it multiple times, or they just roll you and push you along in a season where it's like your team may not want to go there. It's resisting. The inertia is back there as a fringe playoff team, and they will you not just to the playoffs, but maybe to a bye, to the money, and maybe to a championship. I don't think Irv Smith ever is more than a tight end 2, which is essentially worthless except in a massive tight end premium format.
I mean, I'd give him a shot to be a tight end 1. The problem that, like, if you're not, the difference between 6 and 18 at the tight end position isn't that much in terms of meaningfulness. If you're not going to get into the absolute,
if you don't join the top group,
yeah, you're just not. It's not that big of a difference. And so, I mean, I don't think he necessarily profiles that. I'll never rule out a possibility. I didn't think Justin Jefferson was going to be what he was either. So I'm not going to rule out a possibility. It's certainly possible. I think it's probably a remote possibility.
Yeah, tough to get there with those with Dalvin Cook, those two wide receivers. Let's see though. I mean, if you get one or two of them out, game on, and anything's possible. But
he's got an elite quarterback. He's got an elite quarterback.
A lot of buzz for Tyler Conklin. I will say they actually came out and said we like Tyler Conklin. So let's see what that means. So I don't even know if he'll have a dominant share of the tight end targets. So we can start there first. Last one. I can't see them just benching Tony Pollard after what he contributed. That might shake out to be more of a committee than people think.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Dittos.
I wrote the Football Guys profile on Zeke, so go ahead and check that out. I think I'll believe Pollard takes Zeke's job.
Did you see a ceiling of running back 10? Was that in the article?
I didn't put this name in there when we were talking about Barkley and McCaffrey, but I think it's Zeke's the other one, right? I mean, he's got an elite ceiling.
If that offense is humming, who do you think stands to benefit a lot in the short range? I mean, what if Dak doesn't quite run as much in the red zone, getting those 4, 5, 6 red zone touchdowns he typically does?
I tweeted this out, and it was just absolutely unfathomable to me. Do you realize how high Zeke ranked in the 5 weeks that Watson played last year? You know how high he ranked? 2. Running back 2. And it's so amazing to me that
how high was Amari Cooper? 1. And people want to discount all these guys.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, I like some of the narratives that get sort of just thrown around about dynasty players. It's just so it does people so much disservice.
The boom bust wide receiver.
The boom bust wide receiver, he's washed up. It's all I think there's actual reasons to be concerned about some of his performance last year. But he was and again, check the article. I wrote it and did a deep dive on it. But I think he finished it running back 10 last year. You would have thought that he finished
25.
in an island in the South Pacific, right? For the last 2 months of the season, right? And that he Ricky Williams the end of the season. I don't know. I don't understand a lot of this stuff. The people that make up these narratives are far brighter than I am, obviously.
Things went completely sideways post Dak Prescott injury, and their defense was horrid. And yet Zeke, as you mentioned, total points, he was right there. In adjusted points per game, he was 15 for the season. He was a top 6 play the first 4 years of his career. We're talking a historic track player that had his stud quarterback go out for most of a year. He was still in the top 15. And all of a sudden now he's at a career crossroads, a nexus of value. And people wonder if he's going to get overtaken by a day 3 backup on the team. That's what people think. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And I think you started that whole thing with, I'll believe it when I see it.
Right.
Let's see it. Let's see Zeke getting 10 touches a game and Pollard got 16. And it's not a blowout game where they're up 30 to nothing at halftime. Right. I'll just wait. I'll hold my breath.
Yeah. Because Zeke's contract's locked in too. He ain't going nowhere. He's going on. Absolutely
I don't
nowhere.
know. People don't want to. Yeah. And again, he was one of the last guys to get that elite pedigree.
Correct.
Elite. Remember, they don't spend that amount of capital on a running back. Well, Zeke was going to go. If he didn't go to Dallas that year, he was going in the next few picks to somebody. And again, he's on a Hall of Fame track. Say whatever you want. He's on a Hall of Fame track where he currently is. And this offense is set up to absolutely eat. I think I saw someone said I projected Dak Prescott for 6,000 passing yards, and I don't even feel like it was super aggressive. And I was like, I can kind of see that. If their defense stinks like it does, with their weapons, I can totally see it. But you're like 55, 5,800. I totally
17 games.
That's where exactly. That's another factor. He gets a bonus 350, 400 yard game this year. Totally in play. Exactly.
Someone tweeted out yesterday, like, is Dak Prescott good, or is it just all weapons or whatever? And I just retweeted and just said yes.
Is it all the star? Is it just the uniform? Are we getting intoxicated by America's team yet again?
It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, I don't know. It's just it's like that offense. I think the two offenses that could be just on a rampage this year could be them. And I mean, I think very highly of Dak for a lot of reasons, but I think them and the Rams. I mean, like, just fire up the weapons that they have. I mean, it's just and I think Dallas is even a different strata in terms of their talent. I think they're better. I think the McVay factor.
What's mind blowing is that people don't realize Michael Gallup is good. Like, he's on that offense and he's like, we don't even know who you are. and yet he's the one making these ridiculous plays down the sideline, but everyone wants to focus. It's kind of like what's that line about, like, people lose to the Yankees because they can't stop staring at the pinstripes. And with Dallas, it's like everyone's looking at Cooper and Zeke and CeeDee Lamb now. And it's like, so Michael Gallup, I mean, people are going to let him go.
Yeah, I don't. The amazing part is people are doing this thing with Lamb. It's like, hey, we're going to make him an elite wide receiver right off the jump, and it's like, hey, he was playing behind Gallup. Like, so was Amari. Like, and he played like 2.5 games behind Michael Gallup. Like, it wasn't close in terms of the snap share. And the argument I've seen is, well, he just plays in the slot. I was like, okay, so we're gonna take a slot receiver who's gonna play the third most snaps on his team and make him wide receiver 4 in Dynasty, right? That seems like a horrendous idea. It's again, some of these things, I don't know. And
this is one of those offenses where you sit and you say, there's a lot of weapons to eat. That what happens if one of them is out? Because you start funneling this offense. Let's say Cooper's out for a month. Let's say Lamb is out for 4 to 6 weeks. What does that do to the remaining guys? This is still like, it's a pretty exciting when you talk about the infrastructure being there for a massive fantasy outcome. But then it gets consolidated at points during the season where you have more predictability. I mean, you might have weeks where, Cooper is projected as the wide receiver 1 for the week. Gallup's in the top 20 because Lamb is out, or you get Gallup out and all of a sudden, Lamb and Cooper are both in the top 12, or something like that. I mean, you got to be, and you don't get a lot of situations where a team could provide 2 top 12 fantasy receivers, but yet you get a high intensity upside for like this. It could absolutely be one of those that happens.
Yeah. Dalton Schultz, dirt cheap, too. Schultz, dirt cheap.
Well, you brought up Dalton Schultz over and over again. And and I always bring up that Blake Jarwin got signed to a truckload of money last year from the ether. Do you think there's going to be a clear starter where one guy gets like 80% of the tight end snaps, or it's 50-50?
I mean, Blake Jarwin's coming off an injury and hasn't really done a ton in his career. Okay. So, I think if the interesting thing to me is this difference in cost, because I don't think Blake Jarwin has done anything to really like
warrant a premium over.
Right. And I mean, if they play 60-40, where is that worth a 25 spot difference? And
well, I will say
no.
I will say Schultz had a dominant share because Jarwin was completely out, and he was still like a mid tight end too. So that's the one thing that kind of gets me is like, is there tight end upside here considering the wide receiver talent, Zeke, etc.? I'm a little concerned there. That's one part that gets me.
I mean, if Dak Prescott's throwing the ball instead of Dalton, I mean,
true.
And the other thing too is like, if you're going to get some volume and you're like, it's a lot of its volume plus touchdown variance, right? Like Robert Tonyan, right? That's how those stories happen. So I think if he's the lead guy, it's an interesting. I think Schultz probably adds an element that that maybe they didn't have, right? And so I actually saw an interesting comp that the loss of Jarwin actually forced Lamb to do some stuff that they probably weren't comfortable with him doing, which again begs the question of why he played so few snaps, if that's true. So I don't know. It's an interesting. I think how that situation all sorts out is going to be interesting, but I think there's like. It's eat at the buffet of fantasy points. Just
Yeah. My final thought, and you've been kind of gracing around it a couple times, is this whole, the anointing. We talked about it last regular season, where it's like every week, who's the flavor? Who's the 24 and under wide receiver that we want to say is the new it thing and wide receiver 1 in Dynasty? And I don't know. I'm an older wide receiver guy. So it's just, I'm a profile wide receiver guy, I guess I should say. And you typically, it's hard to get there when you're 23 to kind of build that confidence, because you can have these blips. I mean, remember where we were with Chris Godwin a couple of years ago, right? That he finished like as wide receiver 5 and everyone was on him. What has Tampa Bay done since? I mean, Mike Evans still there, still rocking. They bring in Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown might see more targets than him this year. I just, where are we? Where are we is what I would say. So you can even have a one-off, pretty strong season. That is not how a long-term profile is built for the confidence curve. So be careful, and we've got a lot of talent and a lot of pedigree around the water cooler, but you know what? You can, if everyone's kind of rising and moving up, someone's going to finish wide receiver 20 and 50. So be careful. And it's really tough to get there if you're not your team's wide receiver 1. So be careful with anointing upside if they are not slated to be the team's wide receiver 1 at a minimum, or at least have a strong quarterback. All right. That is going to do it this week. We discussed a ton way back when, many minutes ago. We actually talked about the Miami and Indianapolis quarterback situation, some of those storylines. You can check out Jordan's article over at Footballguys, in addition to all of his other content he's been putting out since the NFL draft. We also talked about signing up for that Footballguys daily email. It's footballguys.com/email. And we talked a lot about from the Shark Pool, things like Tyler Lockett, Michael Carter, in terms of profiling and how to, I think one of the discussions we haven't talked about much over the past 60 episodes is assessing trades. What does that mean? Tracking it yourself personally, but also looking back, that hindsight factor of why did you make the trade? And that is so instructive by not really pummeling yourself if the process was right. Bad beats. You almost have to think like a poker player, think like a card player, that you're gonna lose hands, and sometimes you're gonna win hands that you had no business winning. And it goes both ways, but the aggregate result means you got to be active and you got to make the trades, because you are going to lose some. You're not going to have 100% success rate just because of the variance involved in the assets in which we are trading. So I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.